Hello everybody and welcome back. It's been a while. I got sick with some kind of flu or something and my voice is still a bit down. But anyway, let's get slowly back into it. I was supposed to give you a full-on review of this one. But the problem is this was published I think in May, so anyway, like months ago. And I was expecting this to be a huge page turner. Because usually when it comes to the Beach Boys related stuff, I can't get my hands off of it. So I'm just like reading, if it's a new book or whatever, I'm reading it in a day or something like that. But with this one, by the way, my dog Hugo is right there behind, under the camera, chewing a bone. So that's where the noise comes. And I'm sorry, I cannot do anything for it. But try to live with that image in your minds. But anyway. So with this one, it just didn't happen. It didn't grab me in the way that, I don't know, really any other Beach Boys related book has done with me. And we'll dive into the reasons why, at least why I think that was, in a few moments. But I want to start off with the positives, because I don't want to just ramble on with the negatives, because there are aspects with this book that I really love too. So it's really hard to, once again, sort of show you anything with this, because if I wanted to show you anything, I should have this on a table and then have the camera on top of me. I cannot really like scroll the pages or anything because it's just so heavy and big. But first of all, my biggest plus or pro that I have with this one is that it has a lot of tons of cool images. So it is basically a picture book. And if you are a weird guy like me who likes to look at pictures of the Beach Boys, you do love this book, at least in that area, because it does offer a lot of cool pictures of them. Sure, many of them have been seen before, but there are many instances where I'm trying to show this to you, like this, where you have a photo shoot of a certain happening, and you sort of just have all the dias, so to speak, right next to each other of that moment. So there's like a lot of cool moments that you haven't seen before. You might have seen one or two chosen images of that shoot before printed somewhere, but you haven't seen all of that. There's a cool full-on, I think it's like 2 pages of shots like that from the Keeping the Summer Alive sessions, and those are especially really cool. They have a really nice lighting, and I actually wish that they were printed a bit larger, at least some of them. There's a really funny one at the end where Brian is fleeing the studio with Mike and Al right behind him. It's hilarious. But anyway, there's a lot of cool pictures, and one kind of mind-blowing image for me was the one where Dennis is giving Mike middle finger, humorously anyway, in some sort of TV studio or whatever. And I always thought that it was Carl next to Mike in that image, and I think most of people have thought so. There's like Carl with a sort of, I don't know what, sort of funny hat. But anyway, there you can see shots before that one and after that one, and it gets obvious that it's actually Brian. So it was really revelationary for me that, wow, there's like Brian doing like this, and Dennis is giving the finger and Mike's there smiling. Anyway, it's Brian. I always thought it was Carl. So, you know, little things like that I really love. And I also love the fact that there's a lot of not just images like photographs, but then there are a lot of sort of reprints of, or scans or whatever you want to call them, of like tape covers, like these session tape boxes, and also like handwritten lyrics sheets and notes or music sheets, whatever you call those. And all kinds of little cool things, like there you can see some more. So these I really love. But yeah, like I mentioned, that's probably the biggest thing that I love about this, the images, whether they are the actual photographs or or scanned images of some session, I don't know, lyrics or notes or whatever. So all of that I do really love. But after that, it's kind of hard for me to come up with positive things when it comes to actual, like, the actual text. And I know I'm gonna probably get flag about this, but I don't really care. I want to be honest with you, because some people are probably still wondering whether they want to spend the money. This was pretty expensive, so whether they want to spend the money on this one or not. So, in my opinion, this is not an essential book for a Beach Boys fan. And if you are a new fan of the Beach Boys, I wouldn't recommend this one for you for multiple reasons. But if you have the extra money and you just want to, or you know that you're gonna enjoy the images themselves enough, then this might be worth picking up. But to sort of, don't really rely on the text part, because this is not really a real book. It's a picture book with some texts here and there. But okay, here you go. That is really irritating me. Do you really have to do that right over there? Anyway, so, and why is that? Why am I bothered with the text? Well, it's well written. You do have quite a bit of text here and there, but it's mostly sort of big chunky fonts with colorful texts and stuff. And the sort of the design of that is, it kind of reminds, it's something that it's kind of like a kid's book, so it is not like a real book. The text is quite big, so it comes off as if there's more text to it than what there actually is. They are more like anecdotes and stuff. It's not really sort of like a story. It's just like anecdotes by all the members of the group. But here's like my main issue when it comes to that. And it is, with the Beach Boys, it's essential in my view at least to know the context of that statement or that answer, or what, like if Brian said something or Mike said something or Carl or Al or Dennis or whatever. At least to me, it's super essential to know when they said that. What interview was that? Which date? And the context, the full context. At least as much as there's possible to get. And with this book, you have no idea of the context, because there is no source listed on any of these things. So, for example, let's just open this up from somewhere. Like, I don't know. Here is... okay. So, for example, here. They are talking about... I think this is Smile chapter. Yeah. I'm pretty much here. So there you have like statements by Carl, Brian, Al, Mike, Bruce, Al. And for example, with this Smile stuff, I think it's pretty essential to know if Brian's talking about Smile, whether these statements come from 66, 67, or later in the 60s, or from the 70s, or 2000s. And why is that? Well, at least to me, it's super interesting, because if you know something about the Beach Boys, and this concerns especially Brian and Mike, but the rest of the guys too, their views on certain topics and their own work especially change throughout the decades. And sure, if you are you have that history and you've read everything about the members, you can kind of remember that, oh, this statement comes from that piece of interview from 76 or whatever, like many people who are hardcore fans probably do remember a lot of that information. I'm not that good, so to me some of the things is very familiar, so I'm like, I think I've heard that. Or with some of the things I haven't heard it, it's completely new news to me that Carl said this or whatever, So I would like to know where this comes from, because to me at least it matters whether it was said in the 90s or in the 60s, because it's like when it comes to these sort of books where basically you are telling a story of beloved, group of musicians that have affected history of music. So it is meaningful. So to sort of just, and you gotta know about these statements too. That kind of bothered me. That they have been spliced together from many sources. So Brian might have said something about a certain song in the 60s, and then he said something more about it in the 90s. So the editors with this one saw that they took those two statements, those two answers or whatever, and then just put them together and sort of made this sort of Frankenstein thing where like different era Brians are talking the same time. And to me that is so bothering. And sure, somebody might be wondering, there really isn't a source, like a source list. Yeah, there is a source list at the end, but it doesn't really help because first of all it's very short. Let me show it to you. It's right at the end. Here's contributors, and here's acknowledgement, and then there's archive sources. So it's just this half page, and it's very short, and I have kind of hard time believing that everything included came just from these, but whatever, The problem is with the statements, it doesn't say what comes from, so it's kind of useless. So I can't really do anything with this source list because nothing's told, like there's nothing marked where what comes from. And that bothers me so much because I have this sort of historian thing in my brain. And for me about the Beach Boys, because they have such a long career and the personalities are so interesting, especially with like Mike and Brian, mainly with them because they've been the sort of the main figures, or the sort of the leading members of the group, and both are still alive. So there's just a lot of interviews with them throughout the decades. So their opinions on things have changed throughout the years, and I think I just find it so interesting to read and hear what they have said about certain things on each decade, especially like if you compare to like retrospective things, how their views changed after decades of a album or whatever compared to what they thought when it was released, especially with like Mike with Pet Sounds during the release and soon after the release of Pet Sounds. It's very well known that Mike didn't really care for Pet Sounds, and later in the 2000s, as he realized that he was pretty much the only person in the world that didn't really love Pet Sounds, he started to change his views, and now he's been talking about for the past few decades that he always just loved Pet Sounds, which is not true. But the fact that if you just take those statements, those later Mike statements, and present them next to the Pet Sounds chapter, and this is just an example. I'm not sure if I actually read the whole Pet Sounds chapter yet, because by the way, I forgot to mention, I only went through the first few chapters, and after that I've just been sort of scrolling around and reading little snippets and pictures, because I haven't really felt that this was that interesting as a whole, to be honest. So it's been kind of hard to read through this whole thing, which I wasn't expecting. So that's why this is not a full-on review. This is just sort of my random thoughts. So yeah, I think it matters to know when this thing was said. And that's my biggest issue with this book, because you don't get offered any context. A reverse argument for my argument would be that it would be too messy, because there's a lot of different quotes, so it would be too messy with each time to write next to it where it comes from. Sure, that might be the case, but it doesn't change the fact that I don't enjoy reading this that much because I don't know the context. I'm not sure if other people are able to understand what I'm talking about and why that matters to me so much, but to me it is just super important. That's why I really love to read the interviews themselves, or just anyway, like if there's a set, like an autobiography, I know that this thing is written in whatever this year, and these are the thoughts that this guy had during this time period, or whatever, you know, like it's much more easier for me to comprehend and sort of build that image in my head, like how the story went and stuff like that. And there's another issue that I didn't yet mention with this one, and it is a sort of major gripe that a lot of people actually criticize this for, and it is the fact that it ends in the year of 1980. So it doesn't discuss anything that happened after, and to me that is a huge issue, because when it comes to a fiction, like a fiction novel or whatever, as a writer you can decide where to end the story, and where you end the story affects whether the ending is happy or sad, basically. And you are allowed to do that because it's your story, you are making it up. But when it comes to documenting real people's lives and, you know, real history, you're not really allowed to do that. Sure, you always have to pick an end point, sure, but if you are choosing an endpoint for the reason only that you don't have to talk about the bad stuff, so to speak, you are whitewashing the story, you are rewriting history. And that is a huge issue for me with this book, because if you give this to somebody who doesn't know much about the Beach Boys, you don't even get half of the story. You get a whitewashed rewrite of their history. And that's a huge issue for me. And I think it's really distasteful, especially for Dennis and Carl, but also for Brian and the rest of the members too. So that's really all I want to say about that. I do not accept that decision at all. At the end there's not even like a little chapter, like a little list of the major things that happened afterwards. There's really nothing, it just ends. And also the fact that the book is titled The Beach Boys by the Beach Boys, and that's it. It's not The Beach Boys by the Beach Boys 1961 to 1980 volume 1. If it was that, then I could maybe accept it, because I knew that there was gonna be another, you know, volume, but there most likely will not be. But that was really all I have to say about this right now. I'm sorry that I sort of promised you to give you the full-on review and I wasn't able to deliver, but anyway, this was really all these were the sort of major things I would have talked about in the review too, so I don't think it's any that different really, but still I cannot really call this a review because I didn't read the full book yet. Overall I'd give it maybe, I don't know, maybe like 3 stars out of 5 or something like that. So even after all the negatives, I do still think it's alright. It's a good book, but it is not essential in my viewing at least. But anyway, what do you think about it? Have you read it? Would you recommend it? I would love to know. Even and especially if your views are different than mine, especially then. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully we'll see you sooner than later on the next video. Take care. Bye bye.